Certainly the latest twist in this ongoing saga. We saw Julian Assange presenting himself to the Ecuadorian embassy here in London a little earlier on today. Now, we've heard from a statement from the Ecuadorian Foreign Ministry, and they said that when he presented himself, he made a statement speaking of the regrettable decision to not be able to return to his home country, that of course being Australia, as it would not guarantee even minimum guarantees for his safety. Now, he spoke in that statement of their failure, ignoring their obligation to protect citizen that's been persecuted politically, and also that's been investigated for political crimes in the US. And it says at the end of the statement, a country where the death penalty is still in force. So that might give you a little bit of an idea what's actually going on at the moment in Julian Assange's head when he seeks political asylum from Ecuador. Obviously, a huge amount of concern after the UK Supreme Court turned down his appeal against extradition to Sweden at the end of last month, that he would be very shortly going to Sweden, where pre-trial detention's extremely fierce, and there have been a lot of his freedoms that he's had here in the UK, bearing in mind he's been under house arrest here in the UK. So a lot of concern, and also moving on from that he'd then be extradited to the US, where, as he said in that statement, concerns that the US talking about espionage and the release of state secrets, and so a big concern about what would possibly face him there. Well, a huge amount of speculation, of course, after he's taken that steps as to exactly why. Now, we know Julian Assange on his show for RT has actually interviewed the president of Ecuador. They seem to hit it off pretty well in that interview, and in fact the president of Ecuador in that says, "Welcome to the club of the persecuted." Now, we know the president of Ecuador is a huge fan of WikiLeaks. In that interview, he'd spoken to Julian Assange about the benefit of WikiLeaks, about the brilliant work that it did towards the freedom of the press. Also, on the back of that, we saw the diplomatic cables that were released by WikiLeaks that massively embarrassed the US government. We saw the US ambassador in Ecuador sent away. And so we know that the president of Ecuador was already a very big fan of Assange and WikiLeaks himself. Now, what's also very interesting is that in the statement released by the embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy here in London, they said that they're evaluating the request. They're going to obviously be taking the decision into account at the moment. They did say they'd be respecting the rules and principles of international law, but also in there they said they'd be taking into account the policy of Ecuador for safeguarding human rights. Now, that's a very interesting statement because, of course, the UK government has come under massive criticism with its decisions about the whole handling of Assange's case. And, of course, the UK upholds itself as a defender of human rights, and many of his supporters say that it's been completely the opposite, and they very much let Julian Assange and the human rights cause down there. So it will be very, very interesting now to see what exactly the Ecuadorian government decide.